What we're going to discuss today is what's new in asset management from the latest versions, key functionality of asset modules, some of the setup options that you have within the module that can save users data entry time, and some of the cool inquiries that are available within the asset module. I'd also like to take us through some of the processes in norming assets where you can add an asset, convert an asset to a work in progress asset, continue to add value to that asset, and how to convert from a current fixed asset to a work in progress asset and back again. I'd like to show some of the functionality around reversing depreciation and splitting of assets. Very often on site, customers will ask if they can reverse a depreciation, or if they have the ability to, how could they dispose of part of an asset. So these suggestions are based on client requests. There are four main modules within asset management, and in the asset accounting module, what's new in versions 2016 of Sage and 2018 is the ability to reverse the year end. Now, in prior versions of norming assets, you cannot reverse the year end. Once you run your year end, you cannot go back. And this feature is just gold, because the ability to run your year end and you realize the auditors come back and say, hey, actually you need to change some of these values, you need to change the rates that you're depreciating at, and you can reverse that. You can also process acquisition transactions in prior years, which you haven't been able to do before. You can process depreciation across multiple financial years, and you can reverse depreciation across multiple years. Another feature in the later version is the ability to display the components total of the master component asset. So where you might have a master asset like an aeroplane, for example, that the fixtures and fittings are separate to that component, but you can see the totals associated with it. You can process negative add-on transactions for an asset, and they've included more useful information on the asset listing report. In the latest version, 2018, they have this feature where in all modules you can post all batches, as opposed to posting one batch at a time, and they've included this in the asset accounting module. In the four asset management modules you have asset accounting, leasing, maintenance, and asset tracking. We'll discuss them more in detail as we go. In the asset accounting module, you have the ability to add unlimited number of optional fields, also known as user definable fields, flexible asset barcoding and numbering. You have the ability to manage the asset construction process where you continuously adding value to existing assets. Full depreciation facility, including depreciation projection and reversals. The asset accounting module handles acquisitions, and in those acquisitions, you can process them via accounts payable, inventory control, purchase orders, or project and job costing. The asset accounting module handles work in progress processing. Adjustments, and adjustments could be anything from adjusting the category, the cost center the asset belongs to, the number of years you depreciate over. It handles disposals with accounts receivable or inventory control. The asset accounting module does merging of assets, splitting of assets, and the revaluation of assets. Another module within the asset management is the asset maintenance. This deals with the maintenance of assets where you wish to manage equipment and components, you want to manage meters, service level agreements for equipment, notifications for meter readings, renewals of service level agreements, set up regular scheduled maintenance activity, process maintenance orders for scheduled maintenance, and allows you to generate accounts payable invoices based on scheduled maintenance. The asset leasing module handles leasing of equipment. So whether it's leasing in or leasing out of assets, there could be rental assets, it could be equipment that you rent out to customers. It automatically creates the AR invoice for lease billing transactions and allows you to track the asset lease history and billing schedule. And then lastly, asset tracking gives you the ability to track your physical location of the assets. You can print asset labels and barcodes. It provides an interface with a barcode scanner and the software, which will be written specifically for that scanner, and allows you to update the asset status and location with the scanner. And you can track asset assignment and return by employee, and you can schedule asset assignments. So those are the 4 core modules of the asset management system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through some of the key functionalities that will help us in saving data entry and time. So what I'd like to do is looking at within Sage, this is Sage 2018, so if it does look a bit different, it's because it's the latest version and it's got this cloud look and feel. Within your asset management, I'd like to go through the process of adding an asset and then transferring that asset from being a current asset to a work in progress asset. So to do this, I go to asset management, asset accounting, that's where we're working, and I want to process an acquisition. With all modules within Sage, they're generally batch orientated, and you work with a batch list. And here I'll create a new batch. And I have the ability to put in the information around the asset I'm acquiring. Here I have the ability to select whether it's a new asset, an existing, or a new add-on. And this is going to be a new asset. It generates a document number automatically. When entering acquisitions, I can specify a default template. And what that template does, it allows you to have a predefined list of fields that will be associated with this asset. Very often the data entry person is not aware of what is the year's wear and tear or what cost center should this asset go to if I'm acquiring it for that location. So you can have all these defaults set up. By selecting that default, it will pre-populate information such as the cost center, location, etc. for that asset. When processing a new asset, you select the transaction date, the posting period, and you have the choice to select whether you're acquiring an asset from an accounts payable invoice, a general ledger journal, or inventory control. As I selected the default template up here, in the detail section, the template is selected. The asset ID is generated automatically based on the setup. When you set up your norming assets accounting module, you specify the structure of that asset number, and that is going to be how your assets are numbered moving forward. That could be based on cost center, location, user group, company. There's so many levels, and you can construct your asset number based on your requirements. I will put here this lab of the building. And when acquiring an asset for the first time, you have the ability to specify if it's a normal asset or a work in progress asset, simply by double clicking on the status. If I add an asset as a work in progress asset, it will not allow depreciation to happen for this asset until I make this asset a current asset by transferring it out of work in progress to current. Okay, this is a work in progress asset. It is category buildings, and I'm going to press F9 on the line. The bottom it'll tell you here, press F9 to edit the asset detail. If I press F9 on the line, I can see information pertaining to this asset. It belongs to the cost center manufacturing. It's a building. It's in location number 1, and it belongs to the retail group. These are all fields that you can define lists for and associate them with assets to assist with reporting. The account set generally handles the balance sheet relating accounts to an asset. The budget code allows you to assign your assets to a budget. So in this example, I've created a budget called my Smart Street Building budget, And all the building I'm doing is allocated to this budget code and all the assets I acquire. What that allows me to do is compare all the assets I have acquired under this budget versus the budget and the variance. So when adding an asset, you can specify the estimated life of that asset, depreciation, and the depreciation method. Now, these depreciation methods are generally based on client needs. Very often one customer might say, I need my assets to be depreciated by 12 months of the year, and another will say, I need it the exact days of the month. So depending on the requirement, you'd base that formula, although it does come with some pretty standard formulas out the box. You have the ability to be pretty flexible. And here I'm adding $1 million asset. You have two book ledgers you can have, a book, which is your accounting depreciation, or your tax, which is your, according to the ATO standards, what you should be depreciating this asset over. You have full multi-currency ability to track your purchases in different currencies. So there, I have added one asset, and it's a work in progress asset. The asset number is building manufacturing 006. Okay, and that is how you can add an asset as a work in progress asset. What this will do from an accounting perspective is look at the control account set the asset belongs to and refer to the work in progress account and debit the work in progress account for the acquisition of this asset. When you transfer from work in progress to current, it'll then handle the accounting entries out of work in progress to the fixed asset control account. So I'm going to post the dispatch. If I were to go do an inquiry on this asset under the AM asset screen, I would see this asset, number 6, if I were to open it, has a status of work in progress, and I can see the acquisition date. I also have the ability under the asset inquiry screen to filter and only see assets belonging to a certain category or a particular cost center. If I just wanted to see buildings, it would restrict my inquiry. Clicking on this Go button will restrict my inquiry to just buildings. And here, when I open that asset, is the information I can see that is stored against that asset. It's a work in progress asset, the start date, and the estimated life. If I were to have further value added to that asset, for example, I've laid the concrete, we're now putting a fence around this asset, I could then go and add on value. So where a transaction type is no longer new, I'd be doing a new add-on, and it'll ask me which asset I wish to apply this add-on to. And that is where I could specify the asset that I'm adding value to. So I've now added value to this asset. And when I inquire on that asset, I will have the ability to see number 6. The original purchase cost was $1 million, and the adjusted book value is $1 million, $1,012,000. So all this information collects against that asset. And if I were to want to see all the transactions that made up that value, I could print the asset history. for that asset. I'm going to exclude any depreciation. Here on my concrete slab, number 6, asset number 6, I had the concrete building, I had the date, and then I had the fencing. You could store additional information against it, such as references or vendors that you purchased that from. And I can see what makes up the total value of that concrete slab. Okay, so that is adding an asset, and this asset, as mentioned, is a work in progress asset. We can convert that asset from a work in progress to a current asset by doing a transfer. It is a very simple process. It transfers from work in progress to asset or from asset to work in progress. So if you have an existing asset like a huge generator that fails, that you have to take out of production to have it repaired, add value, to replace parts, and you can transfer it back to being a current asset. And this is where you specify which asset you're transferring from WIP to current. And it's merely a process of hitting the proceed button, and it's been transferred. So we have added an asset, we've added value to an asset, and we have transferred an asset from work in progress to current. That means that asset is now available for depreciation. Another function I'd like to highlight, which is something that some users are not familiar with, is reversal of depreciation. So under asset accounting, you have your acquisitions, which handles the acquisitions of assets, adding value onto assets, transferring assets from work in progress to current. You have your depreciation. Now, depreciation is based on the method you selected and the number of years that you wish to depreciate that asset over. But you also have the ability to reverse depreciation. Often, auditors go to clients or end users and say, right, you can accelerate the depreciation of that asset, or that asset should have been depreciated over a shorter period of time. And what you need to do is you need to back out that depreciation, change the value that you wish to depreciate that asset at, and reprocess it. And what the depreciation reversal allows you to do, just that, back out the depreciation for a particular asset, a range of assets, or your entire asset register. And you can specify the reversal period that you want to go back to. You can specify for book, or for tax, or for both. That'll back up the depreciation. You then have the ability to go and adjust whatever you needed to adjust in accordance with your requirements, and then you can go and reprocess that depreciation for that asset. That is reversing depreciation. I'd like to touch on asset accounting, merging and splitting of assets. This allows you to take multiple assets and merge them into one asset, or in some instances you have an asset that you split into multiple assets and dispose of a portion of that asset. Okay, in this example, I've taken a coating machine and I've split it into two different assets, and it allows you to split by a percentage, which means you can take 30% to one asset and 70% to another asset. Under asset accounting, you have an AM adjustments facility, which will allow you to process adjustments against assets. So once an asset is acquired in a norming asset, you don't have the ability to just go and change information relating to that asset. If that asset, for example, changed cost centers or physical locations, or you wanted to adjust the year's depreciation for that asset, you would have to process an adjustment entry for that asset. So if an asset was acquired and associated with a cost center, however, it was incorrect, or it physically changes cost center, you would have to process that adjustment. And here you'd specify what you're adjusting, whether you're adjusting the cost center, the location, the life of the asset, the rate of depreciation, the number of accumulated depreciation counts this asset has had. You would process that through adjustment processing. And we have a function in norming assets that some users are not familiar with, and that is the bulk adjustment function. Bulk adjustments allow you to process an adjustment across multiple assets. A good example is if you're closing down one physical location and you want to move all the assets to another location, you could adjust a location to, for example, Southern, where the location is Northern. And what I would be doing here is saying any assets that are associated with location 1 automatically adjust to location 2. So this is a bulk adjustment function. And the reason why I wanted to touch on that is this could save you time if you're processing multiple adjustments across multiple assets. The bulk adjustment function could be used. The next on our agenda to discuss was asset inquiry and available information on an asset. So my favorite place to go under assets if I'm making inquiries on assets is under the asset inquiry screen. That'll show you the asset listings themselves. However, if I want to see the activities across an asset or what has been processed for an asset, I can call up that asset, manufacturing number 6. I can see the different types of transactions and I can filter by those transactions, or I can process all transactions against this asset. Here I can see the asset, the date the asset was acquired on, the value, and other add-ons, depreciations, transfers relating to this asset. Master and component, we spoke earlier about having a master asset and multiple components. And in this example, I have multiple assets associated, an office building, a playground, and a warehouse building, all associated under a new building. This will allow me to run a report to see all the components assets of a master asset. To assign an asset to a component asset, you would do so on the asset register screen, where you would specify that this asset is a component of this master asset. I'd like to touch on some reporting. So under asset accounting, asset history is where you can see any history relating to that asset for any given date range. And you can specify whether you want to see disposed assets based on the status of that asset, whether it's normal, disposed, split asset, and so forth. And where I find this so useful is just in terms of separating out just acquisitions for that period of that year. Asset history report is quite useful for a given date range or period.